Hello, today I'm going to talk to you about staff slings in this video, which has been sponsored by the Great Courses Plus. More of them later. Now, some of you may be thinking, wait a minute, Lloyd, didn't you talk about staff slings in some previous video? And yes, I did. They have been mentioned in a previous video, but I've never shown you how to make one, and that's what I'm going to do in this. So, here is the staff sling that I made when I was a university student, which was, my goodness, months ago, it's all right, it works, but you know, I don't think it's the optimum staff sling. I started with a 6-foot staff, and my intention was to cut it down. You see, I knew from looking at pictures of actual ancient and medieval staff slings in use that they were sort of more broom handle length, so considerably shorter than this. But my plan was to make it deliberately too long, thinking that, well, I'm quite tall, and so maybe a longer one suits me. I try it out, go down to the beach, sling some stones into the sea, and then cut it down a bit, and then, you know, try it again, and then maybe if it still seems a little bit too long, cut it down again until I reach the optimum length. This, as you can see, never happened. This is partly cowardice, because you know it's irreversible. You can't cut a stick longer again once you've cut it shorter. It also occurred to me that the way you find the absolute optimum is you start with a staff that you pretty much know is too long, and then try it out, see how it performs, cut it down, see how big the improvement is, cut it down again, see how big the improvement is, and keep going until you start getting worse again. Then you'll know, aha, I've now passed the optimum length. It was that length just before I cut it down last time, perhaps. And then you have to get a new stick. And I was a student, didn't have very much money, and didn't want to have to buy a new stick. But the stick I'm going to be making the new staff sling with is this. It's an old broom handle. I mean, what's more broom handle length than an actual old broom handle? When I say old broom handle, I don't want you to give you the mistaken impression that you have to age your broom handle. You could use a new broom handle, but it seems a bit of a waste. And of course, if you want to go for that post-apocalypse sort of Mad Max look, you could use a modern tubular steel mop handle or something. But you know me, I'm a little bit more trad in my styling. So I'm going to go for a broom handle, which is, I'm pretty sure, strong enough. I mean, I was flexing this. I think I could, if I really went for it, break this if I really wanted to, but I don't think I could break this accidentally. So this is what I'm going to be making the staff sling out of. But I have also this to use as an example to show you. So the staff sling has really just two things. It's got a staff, so you need a bit of wood, a stick, and the sling bit, which you can make just out of string. Now this one, as you can see, has a leather cup as well, but that's not necessary. What you'll be doing is plaiting a bit of string and then carving a hook, and one end of the string has got a loop in it, and you'll put that loop into the hook, and then you put a stone in the sling, and you're off, essentially. And then we need to carve a little groove in the staff as well for the lower bit to attach to, so it doesn't slide around. And that's pretty much it. It's quite a quick process. So you will need a stick and some string. That's not very demanding. But I should say a few things about string, because it's possible to go wrong with string. Now, one type of string you might use is sisal string. This is sisal string. Now, sisal string is it's a vegetable fibre. It's strong, it's hard, it's cheap to buy and easily available. It does look a little bit sort of flyaway. There are always these individual little fibres that fly off one way or the other, making it look a bit ugly. And it's an uncomfortable string. It's quite harsh on your hand. It's quite abrasive and rough. But I would say that even though it's beige, and that's a marvellous thing, it's perhaps not the best to use for authenticity's sake, because sisal, you may not know this, is actually a species of cactus. And were you to get in a time machine and go back to medieval Yorkshire, I think you would search in vain for the cacti fields of Merry England. So sisal, whilst it's quite definitely an option, is, if you want to be authentic in that European sort of way, is not the best. I've got here some jute string, which is green. I got it. It's sold for use in gardening, and it has that quite distinctive jute smell. So this is a bit more authentically European. Another word of warning on string. Here is a ball of what appears to be perfectly serviceable string, which I got from a shop. I believe it was called Everything is a Pound. I can't remember exactly how much it cost, but no matter. And here is the problem with this string. It seems fine, but it's rubbish. It breaks. Cheap string just breaks really easily. I do notice that a lot of the cheap string that's in shops in Britain says made in India on it. So I'm going to be using this string, which is much stronger. But I had to pay quite a bit more for it. So don't skimp on the string. Pay for reasonably decent stuff. But of course, if authenticity is of no interest to you whatsoever, you could use modern nylon strings and I'm sure they'd be fine. So I'll be showing you how to plait those into the string later. But first, I should say perhaps a word or two about my sponsor, The Great Courses Plus. Now, The Great Courses Plus, as many of you will already know, is an enormous website which you can visit and find on it thousands of lectures from distinguished university professors from around the world on a great variety of topics. I tend to look at the history stuff, but there's all sorts of stuff on there like science and medicine and health and how to do stuff like how to play chess or do photography, those sort of things. One course that caught my eye was Daily Life in the Ancient World by Professor Robert Garland. And it's 48 lectures. Normally they're only 24, but this is a 48 series of 48 lectures. And he covers what it was like to be say an ancient Roman or an ancient Greek or an ancient Persian, but not just the usual sort of people that we hear talked about all the time, the soldiers and the politicians. But what about the other people, the old? What about the refugees? What was it like to be disabled in ancient Greece? What if you were very poor or a child or a woman or whatever? So he looks at all those various different categories of people as well. So it's more of a comprehensive look over 48 lectures, and you can see the whole lot for free if you've got the time, because if you go to the link in the description, or if you just love typing, you could always type in www.thegreatcoursesplus.com/Lindy Beige, and this will take you to a landing page which supports this channel as well, because they'll know that you got there from here. So I get a little gold star for that. And then you will find an offer there of a free trial, so you can have a look at a load of the lectures, and if at the end of the trial period you decide, I don't think this is for me, well, you just sign out and you will owe nothing. Otherwise, you can carry on paying a subscription and see loads more lectures, and there really are thousands of them. So why not try the Great Courses Plus? Now, back to staff slings. So, oh, wait a minute. I missed something. Yes, I missed something out. How forgetful of me. You will, of course, be curious to know about the quality of Robert Garland's Scholar's Cradle. Well, I did a bit of research and ho, look at this. Huh? There. Can you see it? Yeah, he's gone for the reverse butterfly interlocked cradle, and he's just bouncing it up and down. He's just flaunting it. It's not cutting edge as a Scholar's Cradle goes. It's a bit old school, but I respect that. Anyway, so I dare say his academic prowess is to be respected, and I was going for a better word than respected, because I always use the word respect. It would strike awe. It could strike awe, with a Scholar's Cradle like that. I'll go back to staff slings. So staff slings. What you will need to do is plait a string to go on it. Now, why plait? Because most string is twisted, and couldn't you just twist a few together? Yeah, twisting's not very good, because you don't want the string to get all twisty, and once you've got twisted string and you start twisting it, unless you do it extraordinarily well, you will end up with a thing that keeps just wanting to twist, and you'll spend half your time untangling the dratted thing, whereas a plaited string doesn't feel inclined to twist and behaves much better. And you'll want several thicknesses of string plaited together to make sure that it's really strong, because you're going to be slinging some pretty big stones with this. Now, having used staff slings and hand slings a moderate amount, the conclusion I've come to is that staff slings are not actually for slinging stones further than hand slings can sling. I think they are for slinging bigger stones. They were used in sieges, and sometimes it wasn't a stone, sometimes it was a hollow clay pot filled with nastiness that they were slinging into the besieged town. Early grenades were sometimes, we are told, slung using these things. And a really big stone that you might want to smash down a horse and rider with or whatever, you could sling with a staff sling. So you're going to need strong string and several plies of it put together to withstand the strain of the weight of this stone being accelerated very fast on the end of a long stick. So that's why we plait it together. We also plait it together because, you know, it's an interesting thing to do and it looks nice. So plaiting makes it stronger and disinclines it to twist. Both of these things are good. Now, you can just have a split like this in the string, and that will work perfectly well. If I just get a stone, there we go, should have had that prepared. You put the stone in there and it will actually stay. It works quite well. But you may think, oh no, I'd feel safer if I had a leather cup. I'd feel safer, it would look better. I'd feel more reassured with a leather cup. And well, I would still suggest that with your first string, you do this split, because that will actually give you a good starting point for putting in a cup. So you could just get an elliptical piece of leather and you've got two strong bits of string to sew that to, and the cup will then reassure you by being cup-shaped. But the split on its own does work absolutely fine. Now, one of the things that you have to take into account is the distance between the hook and the string that is tied on, fixed permanently to the staff. What is the optimum? Well, again, I don't know, but what I have done with my first staff sling is I've put them such that when the sling is in use, the two strings are parallel, like this. And I can tell you that it works absolutely fine. And I'm fairly sure that if you were to diverge greatly from this, this angle, that things wouldn't work so well. If you went further down the staff, like this, then as you sling, the bottom string would stay taut and the top sling would quite early go slack, which I suspect is not a good idea. And if you go the other way and have the two pieces of string too close together, I think there's just a little bit of risk that they will interfere with each other, but I don't think there's much of a risk here. And it does mean that both of the strings will stay taut just that little bit longer. So I suspect that maybe the optimum is to have them slightly closer together at the stick end than parallel. So that's what I'm going to go with this time. But I don't really know, I'm guessing. But what about the exact proportions of the hook, I hear none of you cry? Well, here I think the news is good. I can say that this particular hook I carved in just using a penknife, and I thought that this was the minimum amount of hook that could possibly do the job. And I went to the beach to test this, slinging stones into the sea, with a knife and a rasp and a few other tools, and the expectation that I would have to do a lot more carving to get something that would release properly. But I never actually touched the stick because I found that this very simple, not particularly deep hook, which you'll notice only chops into the profile of the staff in that direction, and I haven't narrowed the staff in the other direction at all. It works absolutely fine, so I felt no need to touch it. I did take a little bit off the back edge here, just because that seemed to be a good idea. It sort of looked right, and I may do that again. But whether that was necessary, I don't know. So the good news is the exact angle of this hook does not seem to be very important. But what of the proportions? You see, there's not just the length of the stick, you've also got to think about the length of the sling. How long should I make my string so that I have the optimal length of string? Yeah, you guessed it, haven't you? I don't know. What I did here was I made it very long, again, in the expectation that I would shorten it a bit, and find the optimum. And again, I never did. I found that the first length I made seemed to work fine, and so I left it there. But yes, the correct method would be to make it very long, probably too long, and then shorten it a bit, and see if you get a better performance out of shorter ones, and then keep going. And then when your performance gets worse again, you realize you've gone too far, and then you'll know the optimum length. There are just so many factors. It's not just the length of the stick and the length of the string and the size of the stone, but it's also the length of your arms and your technique. Do you take a big stride with it? Do you slide your hand down as you sling like that, or do you just keep your hands at one end and swing it like that? There are so many variables that I don't think there's anyone in the world who can tell you with confidence what the absolute perfect length of string for you is. So what I'm saying is, try it out. Right, well, here we have an assemblage of tools that might be handy for doing the job. This, as you can see, is a modern electrical thing, which just frankly seems like cheating to me, even though I dare say it would make the task a great deal easier. And who wants to cheat when making a staff sling? Not I. This is really a painters and decorators tool, so let's get rid of that. This is a spoke shave, which I think, yes, might come in handy, so I'll keep that nearby. A saw, of course, could speed things up, but actually people in the period tended not to use saws very much, largely because there was such a pain to sharpen, so you might avoid using that much. A couple of rasps here. This one's got a rounded side, and this one is completely round, and they may prove pretty handy. I've got a rubber band and a pencil for marking stuff out. I've got a wickedly sharp knife, which is pretty handy for whittling, and I've got the original penknife that I used to carve my very first one. So I just feel, out of tradition, we should use this at least a little bit, just in recognition of its earlier sterling service. This is the sort of Swiss Army knife that if you join the Swiss Army you actually get, and it's great to know that they actually do have a corkscrew, because those Swiss Army chaps, they need their wine. Right, so here we got a stick, and I've just got a step here above some floor that I don't mind getting even more filthy, and I'm just sitting on it to keep it stable. So I'm going to mark that the hook bit's going to go sort of roughly there, and then with the rubber band, my idea is that stretches it round. I should be able to mark in a groove. I think I move it down a little bit, about there. Mark in a groove that goes all the way around in a reasonably straight line. Yep. Right, that's that done. Was that actually very straight? No, because I didn't do it very well. Never mind, it's straight enough, probably. So what shall I start with? I think I'm going to start with this circular rasp and see what that does. Yep, that's doing it. Good Lord, this really didn't take very long at all. I think that's nearly there. Right, now to take this far edge off, maybe. I'll try the spoke shave just to get someone else in on the action. Do you know what? That's probably better for finishing off rather than. Do you know what? Could probably do this with a saw. Oops. I know. I started off with this little fella. Take off the angles with the rasp. I think I'm going to take these top bits in slightly. No reason really, just they're not doing anything, and it just seems to look more of a finished piece of work if I do. Okay, and then just neaten up the edges. I don't want the string to feel rasped by that rough wood. Do you know, I think we're nearly done. Okay, so now this line here, perhaps I can draw it a bit better. Yeah. Ow. Just poke myself with the pointy bit. Draw blood as well, honestly. Hopeless. Mal-coordinated fool! Good. A little bit of blood there. But, you know, that shows that, you know, we've suffered to produce this, and that's probably a good sign. So we've got a hook, and we've got a little bit of tapering on the back edge of the stick. I don't know if that's really necessary. And we've got a groove to sit the string into that's going to be tied on permanently. So there you go. That's pretty much the top end of the machine done. Right, so the next question is cutting the strings. So we're going to get a load of lengths of string and then cut them and then plait them together to make the sling. But how long should those strings be? Because you don't want them too short, that would be a disaster, but you don't really want them wildly too long either, which is a waste. And how many different strands are we going to weave together to make the sling? Well, there is no optimum number, I would say, but I'm going to use 12. But there are other numbers. I've used several other numbers other than 12 and they've worked fine. But the reason I'm going to use 12 is I quite like them to divide by 3 because I'm going to use a outside in plait. So that's the usual 3 strands coming into the hole. So a number that divides by 3, like 12, is good. And I'm going to be splitting it in the middle into 2 reasonably equal ribbons for the central cup. And so a number that divides by 2 is good. So there you go, 12. I think 12 is a pretty good number, but other numbers are available. Now, how long should we cut them? Well, I've made this one, which I think is actually about the right length. But the problem with that, of course, is that I could just attach this and then say, there you go, that's how you do it. But where's the fun in that? You want to see me making a new sling. So I'm going to make a new one. And so what I thought I'd do is I'd make one a compromise between this length, which I think is maybe about right, and this length, which I'm pretty sure is too short, too long. So somewhere around there, which is about 2 feet. So we get 2 feet of string. Here's some string. And we get 2 feet of it, which is to about there. So there's no point in being very precise at this point. So there you go. There's the length of our sling. But of course, the sling goes out and then back again. So we double it. And so now we have 4 feet. But all of our strings are going to go, where did I put it? Oh, there it is. All of the strings are going to loop round. So there are no ends at this end. This is, if you like, the middle of all the strings. And all the ends are going to be at that end. So we need to double it again. So now 2 feet has become 4 feet, has become 6 feet, has become 8 feet. Okay, so now I've got an 8-foot length of string, but we're not, of course, going in a straight line. We're plaiting them together, which means that there's a certain amount of curve, which means that you need a bit more length to accommodate that. And you lose something like 25%. So at the moment we've got 4 lengths of string. So if we put another length in, we've got 5 lengths of 2 feet, so it's now up to 10 feet. But we also need to be able to go around the staff and then tie off. And it's good to have a bit of length to work with when you're tying the knot around the staff. And so I'm going to put on, well, at least 1 foot, but 2 foot. There you go. So I have now got, I get a pair of scissors and I cut. So I've got my length of string. and I've actually got it doubled and doubled again, and then 2 more. So yes, it's 6 times the original length of the sling. So there you go, that's what I'm going to be working with. And that is 2 of our 12 plies, so I need to do this 5 more times. And here we have 6 12-foot long strings, all cut to length and gathered together. Now, I've doubled them all so that all the middles are in my right hand, and I've put a peg on them to hold them together, and all the ends are on this end. So this length here is 12 strands broad. So our 12-foot has become 6 foot, and don't forget we're going to have about a 4-foot sling. So a 2-foot long sling is 4 foot long, if you imagine both parts of it, and then we've got another 2 foot to deal with all the slack and the plaiting and the tying off and all that stuff. So it may seem ridiculously long to cut a string 12 foot for a 2-foot sling, but yeah, this will produce a 2-foot long sling, all going well. Here we have the centers of the 6 strands of string, which I've gathered in this peg. And these are going to be the first bits that we weave together, we plait together, and they are going to make the loop that goes over the staff. But how big should that loop be? Well, here is the staff. It's got to have enough room to hook onto it and enough room to slip off reasonably easily. So I think about, what do you reckon, about there? Does that seem about right to you? Does that seem about the right sort of length? Yeah, something like that. So there's no point in being too precise. I'm going to use some of our rubbish Indian string, and I'm going to tie off where I think the loop should start. Right, and I'm going to start weaving. So get rid of that. Don't need that anymore. So I'm going to start weaving from there. And the first thing we do, as I say, is weave the loop. So I'm going to separate the colours because I want this to look reasonably pretty. So I'm going to do a 6-strand weave in, I think I'll just do 3 strands of 2. So I'll have the 2 pale ones together. I'll have 2 green ones together. And then, oops, there we go. And then 1 green and the sort of beige. Okay, so I want this to be a ribbon, so I put these alongside each other, and I bring the outside ones into the middle, and then I bring these outside ones into the middle, and then I bring these outside ones, whoops, into the middle. Sort yourselves out, guys. So outside ones into the middle, keeping them flat. Outside ones. So you see here that the green is on the inside and the beige is on the outside. So I want to keep the green on the inside as I weave across like that to keep it flat. With these 2 greens together, you don't have the visual guide. And keeping it flat. There we go. You see I'm progressing at a decent speed already. So probably best to speed things up a bit now, a bit of time lapse. Right, now I've got just this far, and already the downstream parts of the string have started to tangle up. So I'm going to spend a moment sorting that out. Ha, phew, that's better. Okay, so now I've got 6 strings going off that way all orderly, and 6 strings going this way in an orderly fashion, so it can make untangling things a great deal easier. So as you can see, there's a little bit of tangle here downstream, but if I just pull one out like that, and that's usually enough, and this will get easier and easier as you go. So back to the plaiting. Or braiding. If you're an American, this is braiding, but if you're British, this is plaiting. I think now we might have enough for our loop. Now what we're going to do is we're going to join these into one 12 ply. So I'm going to have to decide what the pattern's going to be for the next bit. So I need one green strand from this side to join the 3 from that side, and then that'll be a bunch of 4 greens all together. You don't have to bother with this, of course. This is just if you want it to look pretty. So there we go. Those are our 3 teams. Beige, green and 2 white, all green, and a beige, green and 2 white. Because I don't want all these whites together, because this string is slightly thicker and I don't think it'll work very well. I'm now going to undo this bow. Right, okay, so now I can see what I'm doing better. All the greens come into the center. I don't have to keep it flat anymore. Then all of team 2 into the center, then all of team 1 into the center, then all the greens, then all of team 1, then all of team 2, and then all the greens. This is so much easier when you're not trying to make a video about it. Clearly I've come too far. I've done too much plaiting and not enough housekeeping, so I was concentrating too much on talking to you. So if after not too many plaits you sort out the downstream mess, then in the long term it'll probably be time well spent. Right, so having done a bit of housekeeping, we're ready to carry on plaiting. So as before, outside in, outside to the center, outside to the center, outside to the center, outside to the center, and you keep going like this until you've done enough. So we reckoned about 2 feet, so that's going to include the cup. So I'm going to go for maybe, I don't know, 1 foot 10 or so, and then stop. So I've just done a little bit of plaiting there, and you can see that that's already caused a bit of mess down here. So before it gets any messier than that, pick one of these strands and pull it out, pull it through out like that, and then it should all unravel reasonably easily, and then you can carry on. Yeah, it's best to make these detanglings fairly frequent. I would definitely recommend not trying to make a video about this while you're doing it. I can't get my head over what I'm doing because I'm trying to show it to the camera. So I had to unravel a bit there because one of the green strands from this ended up coming across and joining the green strands in that one, and so I had had 5 green strands, and anyway, so back to here and on we go again. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, untangle, 1. What I'm doing is a little bit like basketry. I say this because whereas some of you might think that plaiting is a bit of a girly thing to do, basketry was actually traditionally a man's job, at least in Britain. That's 20 inches. So, it's time to start the split. So, I've measured from the hoop 20 inches or so, and now it's time to split. So I want 6 strands going one way and 6 strands going the other. So this is 12 ply here in 3 bunches of 4, and so now I want 2 bunches of 6. So I also want to think about the prettiness of the pattern. So these are all green, and if I take a couple of whites over there, and then I've got so I've got 4 greens and 2 whites on this side, and I've got 2 greens, 2 beiges, and 2 whites on that side. And I think we can make a pretty pattern. So now I need to separate these out down to the bottom. That didn't take long. Okay, I'm just going to put a peg on that side to hold it. And so now I've got 6 strands. I've got 4 greens, so I'm going to go 2 whites and 2 lots of 2 greens. So I'm going to come over with the 2 whites. Now I'm going back to ribbon, so I want to keep this flat if I can. It's particularly important with the whites because they're it's actually a more substantial bit of string. This peg is annoying me, but I'll soon be away from the peg. Right, that'll do. Okay, so now I'm going to transfer the peg to hold that bit, and then work on the other side. I'll go to green again. Yeah, I typed in jute string onto eBay and very quickly found very affordable large quantities of jute string. I bought a 100-meter bobbin of the stuff, which you could get an awful lot of slings out of. So yeah, I'm happy to report that if you want to get jute string, even if you can't get it at your local corner shop, you can on the internet get jute string very easily. It's pretty close though. It's pretty close. Okay, so take that peg off. Now the task is to recombine the two ribbons into one continuous 12 ply. Make sure you get the flatness of the ribbon right. So lay it out flat, so we're not combining the wrong side with the wrong side. Right, so I've gone the wrong way. I've gone under. Well, never mind. I just turned the whole thing upside down. And yes, I think I've done it. Okay, so over, 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 stop, keep going. Now we have to attach it to the staff. As you see, we've got a decent amount of string left at the end for doing that job, and it's better to have too much than too little. It's going to join from this side on the far side of the hook, and so I'm going to want 6 strings going one way and 6 the other. So that's probably enough. Other side. How best to tie off? 3 small separate knots. 2 of the green strands on one side, 2 of the green strands on the other, and pull tight. Put it in the groove. And now let's tie the white strands together. Two white strands together. In either a granny or I've just done a granny. I've done a granny again. Now, whether you do a granny or a reef knot is 50-50, which means that you tie a granny knot pretty much all of the time, in my experience. There we go. Okay, so we've now got the split, bit of plaiting around the side. It's all sitting in the groove, and we've tied off lots of these. We've got loads of trailing ends, and then if I put that in there, pull it taut, yes, halfway up the split is where we get that. So the length is correct, it is tied off. The only thing now is I've got an awful lot of these trailing ends which will get in the way. So what do? Cut them off. If I cut them off very short, that will be neat, but it means that if anything goes wrong with these knots, I will have very little to work with. So I'd like to perhaps preserve some of this length here. Oh my word, this video has turned out long. Hasn't it though? It's so long. I'm sorry it's so long. If you have watched this far, well, well done on the endurance. I hope that I've said something of interest. And this, would you believe, this version you've seen, which was an editor's nightmare, is after I cut out most of what I said about making a staff sling. So it turns out that I really can witter on about these things. So, in summary, a summary which perhaps should have been the whole flipping video. To make a staff sling, you get a stick, broom handle will do. You get a notch, put a notch in it, and then tie some strings to that, and then plait if you're going to plait, or you could use some modern materials like paracord, but I would consider that cheating. A string, and you put a split in it in the middle for holding the stone, and then possibly add a leather cup if you're so inclined, and then a hoop at the other end, and then you carve a hook into the stick, and then your hoop goes onto the stick, and you're away. Phew, that's pretty much everything you really need to know about staff slings. I mean, obviously you could get a bit more fancy if you want. For instance, there's this sling which I made some while ago. I'll show you it in close up here. And here, instead of bunching 4 strands together and plaiting them as a group, every single individual string has been individually plaited into the pattern, which means that you can get a bit more fancy, a bit more precise, and you know, I think these are prettier and just better patterns. I think functionally these are slightly better, but the difference is very slight, so really you can get away with a cruder plait like this. Now, weird coincidence, which I think I might share with you, is that when stretched out, this sling is exactly the same length as the staff upon which it is mounted. Does this mean, perhaps, that this is the optimum, the magical optimum? Well, I doubt it, because by a weird coincidence, I just thought I'd check with the other one, and yes, the other one, if you stretch it out, the string is exactly the same length as the staff that it's mounted on, and I think this is possibly a little bit too long, so my guess is no, that's not a magical optimum. I think it's just a weird coincidence. But wouldn't it be weird if coincidences never happened? Other designs of staff sling do exist. On the internet, for instance, I found this design where you've got a slot in the end of the staff and a ball on the end of this, the string bit to hold it in place. I don't actually particularly approve of that design though, because if you want to sling uphill or over a wall or something, then you have to go past the horizontal. And if you went past the horizontal with that design, with a big heavy stone, then surely the weight of the stone would then pull the string out of its slot. So I don't see that one as working very well. Also on the internet, I have found pictures of people using staff slings where the stick tapers, and it looks as though they've got a bendy stick that bends like a fishing rod. And here I do talk from a position of ignorance. I've never used that sort of staff sling, but I would have thought that they wouldn't work as well, because you start this sling, you move your hands, and the stone at the end of this stick, at the thin bendy end, is going to stay where it is, largely with its own inertia, and so there'll be a bit of a lag. And then you're putting energy into bending the stick and not making the stone go anywhere. Then eventually the stick will start to straighten, but it'll never straighten with 100% efficiency. You're not going to get all that energy back again. And so I would have thought they'd be less efficient. And most of the pictures from the days of your show what look like fairly stiff and stout pieces of wood. So this is the way I've gone. Right, okay, that, I think, for now, is what I have to say about staff slings.
Did